Call the meeting to order at 5:11. The first one is to review the agenda tonight. I'd like to change the agenda to handle number 5, the report of the executive committee, prior to number 4, the finance committee, switching those two when the time comes. Is there objection to doing that? If not, are there any other changes to the executive committee? The agenda that anyone would like to propose? Here, I got all these things, handing these out, I was hanging on to the whole stack of them.
I said pass them.
Floor set me up already. Right. If not, the first order of business on the agenda tonight is we have 2 new representatives that were from Orange, Washington and Addison region that were asked if they'd like to join the committee. They agreed. We told them, or join the board, we told them to come to this meeting, check us out, and we'd introduce them. So they're up to be elected to the board tonight, and they understanding they'll have to run at the regional meeting to fill a term officially, because that's how it's done. But because of we didn't invite them to the June retreat because it would be kind of hard to come to a retreat that they hadn't, about the organizations that they hadn't been attending. So without further ado, we have
Judy Murray from Orange, Washington.
And Kevin Hansen from Addison region. And just for his benefit, we'll start here with Linda and run around the room quickly so you'll know who everybody is and where they come from.
I'm Linda Smith and I'm from Rutland County. Welcome.
I'm Flordia Smith and I'm from Washington Orange, so it's nice to meet you.
Joe Honeyford, Windsor County.
Kim Gleason from Chittenden County.
Susan Holson, I'm on the VSBA staff, Director of Education Services.
Neil Odell, Norris School Board.
Christina Naylor, Wyndham Southeast, bottom right-hand corner of the state.
Dan MacArthur, the Wyndham region, same as Christina.
Laurie Childers.
Don Collins, way up north on the Canadian border, Franklin Northwest. No, now it's known as Missisquoi Valley School District. Got it. In there, but that was the board I'm used to.
Sue Siglowski, I'm VSBA staff, Director of Legal and Policy Services.
Wonderful, nice.
Clarence Hayes, I'm president of the VSBA board, and
Oh, I'm
Okay.
Carrie. I'm the Director of Operations for VSBA.
she's the glue that makes this organization run. Some of the glue, I should say, but she does the job.
Four-part group.
Is there a motion to appoint these 2 people to the board?
So moved, Clarence.
So moved by Don, second.
Laurie Childers.
Second by Lori.
Can we get a brief bio on them? I'm just curious as to how long they've been on the board.
Okay,
or...
so if we're under discussion.
Gio, if we'd asked for a bio on you.
We can probably get a bio on Gio, but it wouldn't be appropriate for
I
someone.
will amend my motion to include upon presentation of a bio.
Boy, he's ornery tonight.
We'll ask you, tell us a little bit about yourself and your school board service so we have some idea where you are.
Oh, sure. I'm a board member at the Blue Mountain Union School District. I started in 2013. We have now been moved under the Orange East Supervisory Union, so I'm the vice chair of that board. And I am taking the place of another member of the OESU board that used to sit on this committee, Lucas Bear. Is that enough of a bio?
That's good.
I came back to Bert.
Anyone have any questions for?
Just be careful, the guy sitting next to you.
Thanks for joining us, Steve.
Yes.
Kevin?
I was one of the last board, I was on the last board of the Mount Abraham High School board that saw the closing down of the individual boards in town and was elected to the Unified Board District, serving my first term.
Anyone else, any questions for these people? If any questions for us, we're a fairly easy group to talk to. We're all board members, we all deal with all the same things and a little differently, but we all deal with them.
Can we just ask if there's anybody on the phone? I'm not sure. Is
Oh,
there
I'm
anybody on the
sorry.
phone?
Just
Jim was.
Jim.
Saulgiver on the phone.
I'm sorry,
Do you want to
Jim.
introduce yourself, Jim?
Yeah, Jim Saulgiver, I'm from the Bennington region, on the Taconic and Green Board and Bennington Rutland Supervisory Union.
Had a little car trouble.
Forgot about Jim.
It's easy to do.
I'm always forgetting about it.
Well, you're usually here and you don't allow me to do that. You stick up for yourself pretty well.
That's true.
And that's good. Any further discussion or questions? Not all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carried.
Welcome aboard.
You have the minutes on tape,
Right here?
so you're taking?
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
I have to look around, and make sure the clerk, there's a clerk taking these minutes somebody. Report of the Resolutions Committee. Neil? Sir? That's you, right?
Indeed. You want me to go?
Yep.
Okay.
I guess maybe preface this with one thing. The committee will report on all the individual resolutions and what the story is. The motion for each of them will be to approve it as passed, or approve it as presented, take no action, or recommend against it. Those are the three options you have with the resolution that's presented. It's not, what's presented isn't for wordsmithing by the board. All right, because at this stage it winds up going one way or the other directly to the membership at the annual meeting. But those are the three recommendations that we're looking for, one of the three, in a motion for each one of these as they're presented. I state that clearly.
I believe so. I mean, at the end of the day, this board needs to either recommend pass, do not pass, or take no action.
Yep.
And you want to do each one of these individually?
Yes.
Okay, so first one up in your packet is Mill River. The committee met and discussed this one. We recommended do not pass. The committee felt that the resolution was too specific. In addition to that, there have been some recent studies that show that hand dryers can pose a hearing risk for children. Typically, the height of the hand dryers in bathrooms corresponds to the height of an elementary school child. So it's going right into their ear. And there were also recent studies that indicate that they are less effective than paper towels for hand hygiene. So for those reasons, the committee recommended do not pass. I passed that along to Mill River. I did not get a response from them.
Was I supposed to respond?
Nope.
Oh, good.
You were not supposed
You're on time.
Speak now.
Well, actually, that was put forward by a new board member, and when I sent her the response from the committee, she was like, well, you know, what can I do about that? I feel rather strongly. She's very active in political circles, so I mean, she's pretty convinced that she has the right opinion. So I told her she should go to the, annual meeting and speak her piece.
Yep. Yeah, just for everybody, I'm sure everybody knows, but these resolutions get presented to the full membership regardless of the position that this board takes. So no resolution dies here. It will be presented to the full membership in November.
And Liz will be there.
Awesome.
I think.
That's a good recruitment tool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
To participate.
And
Okay.
there's another, I guess, just another sort of a bookkeeping thing, and that is, I believe that we as regional representatives should poll some of our local, either board members or central supervisory union members, get their input, so when we come to the annual meeting, we're voting on behalf of as large a portion of the population that we represent as possible.
So I'll add on to that on September 5th, we have a webinar with Neil and Sue, who staffed the committee, presenting each of the resolutions in it, so that boards can review them in advance.
And
of
with the
meeting.
reasoning from the committee.
Yes, that's Bill's
So-
job.
Oh, go ahead.
At the annual meeting, each SU or SD has a single vote. I do not presume to have any responsibility as a regional representative in voting at that meeting.
That is correct.
Okay.
That is correct. So in
And I
fact, Dan, just to
intentionally-
clarify, yeah, so, and we'll send out very clear, we've done this the last couple of years since the process has changed a bit, but the hope is that because the vote is cast at the SU or SD level, that we give sufficient information and notice ahead of time so that SU, SD boards can put it on their agenda to discuss and appoint who their voting delegate is going to be at the annual meeting, and essentially give them their marching orders in terms of this is this board's position on these resolutions. So we'll get, once this, we have to wait for this board to affirm the packet of materials for the annual meeting. Once that happens, we'll send lots of reminders over the next 5 or 6 weeks so that
Okay.
folks understand.
You had a question?
I
Kim?
do, and I know I've asked this before, and I'm sure there's a reason. We don't put a board recommends do not pass, and here's the 2 sentences why, correct, in writing? It sounds as though we'll do it in the webinar. I'm just wondering, I know I've asked this before, and there's some reason why we don't do it, and I didn't know. If there isn't a reason why we don't do it, would it be helpful to have the packet include why the board's recommendation is what it is?
Well, that's what the webinar is gonna say, right?
But if
So
people
the
are just
bylaws
here,
require the board, and so the committee is making a recommendation to the board. The final report to the membership will replace committee recommendation with board recommendation. And so the bylaws require the board to either recommend do not pass, or take no position. But, I mean, I'm not aware of any reason why not to do it, but we have to have, it's sort of, we're fulfilling the obligations of the bylaws, which say, do one of those 3
Yeah.
things. And the rationale is usually provided in the meeting.
for those who are discussing it with their boards, obviously they can watch the webinar. If there's not a reason not to do it, and it's not difficult to do it from notes of the committee or minutes of this meeting, to capture a couple of sentences for the rationale for the position the board's taken, it might help people be more prepared, and that could then be presented in the annual meeting.
I think typically, that's what the presenter, Neil will get the opportunity to
I
present
think the
these at the
reading
annual
material though,
meeting.
because we're having one vote per SD or SU, just, that would be, at least our board, we last time read or had people watch the webinar before we discussed it at our board meeting, but we also send out, board packets that could have included that link, which might be a quicker read for somebody who's sitting and reading versus like traveling and not able to listen.
Is that something, Neil, that you and Sue can get into the webinar?
I think she's talking about.
Yeah, it'll be in the webinar. I think he was talking about some written form that would go along with the packet of resolutions. or the
Literally just a
recommendations.
couple of sentences if it could
I
be
think
for
I
our
would want to
position.
think about that a little bit before I
Yeah.
committed to it. Some of these are fairly straightforward, and you probably have 1 or 2 line responses. Some other of these might be a little bit more in-depth and nuanced.
To
And
see webinar.
Well, and furthermore, this report needs to be adopted by the board tonight. So it's the report that goes to the membership, and in the absence of that language for you all to look at and include as part of the approval, I think you're delegating a lot to Neil.
Maybe that's why.
So at this point, we need a motion to do one of those 3 things, please.
I'd make a motion to do not pass.
Motion to do not pass, is there a second to the motion?
Up is the River Valley Tech Center. What is presented in your motion services aside from I got a message back from Bob Flint, who was the one that passed this on to me, and he asked me to provide this information for their reasoning to keep the resolution as is. He said, the original resolution was intended to hit 2 related issues. 1, ed fund dollars being spent on social services that should be funded through other means. And 2, there is a major equity issue at play. Compare, contrast, say Woodstock and Springfield. and the amounts each spend on social services versus education, and the wild disparity between educational offerings, yet per pupil costs are close, and Springfield is probably higher. The second thing he said was, politics aside, the main point was to bring some urgency to the discussion on these 2 points. The supposed state chart of accounts will not immediately be functional and certainly not in a position to be useful analytically for a couple of years. This conversation needs to occur much earlier, hence the request to mandate AOE to undertake the study by district now. He also continues, I reference my day job as the Executive Director of Springfield Regional Development Corporation for the Regional Development Corporation for Southern Windsor County. Every day, I'm wrestling with an interlocking set of issues related to workforce, current and future. That's the case everywhere in Vermont, and throw training into the discussion, hence my role as chair of the River Valley Tech Center and the CTE in this area, which is its own district. But what's a bit unique in this region is the gridlock of socioeconomic pressures that adds to the daily challenge of education, but also to the desperate need to attract and retain professionals. The town of Springfield's grand list just dropped 15% in 2018. 29% of households are on reach up or 3 squares. The average home sale price in our region is approximately $94,000 less than the region to our north, and Springfield's average price for 2018 was $133,000. The lack of resources for schools in this region is exacerbated by the pervasive use of money and time on social service activities. So that was his response to our recommendation that they modify the resolution. So at this point, the committee's recommendation is a do not pass.
What's the pleasure of the board?
Can you explain why the committee wanted the language?
Yeah,
I'll
I
make
thought
a motion,
one
I'll
way
make
or
a
the other.
motion to accept what the committee is suggesting and do not pass. And then we can
I'll second the
discuss.
motion.
Thank you.
Seconded by Kim. All right, Kim, go.
Yep, so when the committee considered this, we took a look at the fact that that was one of the original intents of the statewide chart of accounts, was to be able to get to the information that Bob essentially was looking for, that River Valley Tech was looking for here. And we weren't sure that it was appropriate for us to continue to push for this study in addition to the work that's already being done to try to get to that standard chart of accounts system. It just felt like we were pushing the AOE for something that they were already in the process of doing. And so that's why we recommended changing the language in the resolution.
Any other questions or discussion? The motion was to follow the committee's recommendation, do not pass.
Can I ask, I apologize if I missed it. What were the changes we were looking for? Did we have specific language?
We did,
Okay.
yep.
Sorry.
So it might be better if we just take a look at the resolution here. So it says, be it resolved, we just recommended striking Vermont legislature and inserting General Assembly instead.
Oh, in our.
In our recommended modification to their resolution.
Okay.
This is what we recommended that they adopt, and if they did so, then the board was going to recommend a pass. But they declined our modifications and wanted to stick with their original resolution, so now the committee's position is do not pass. Okay, so if I, sorry?
What was the difference
That's what he's
the
going
meaning
That's what,
In the meaning?
of your changes as compared to what they have as their wording? I'm not,
So here, let me see if I can help folks with it. If you just follow along with the resolution in the
Yeah.
packets, this is what they originally proposed, and I will give you the modifications that the committee suggested. So we're gonna strike Vermont legislature and replace that with General Assembly. We're gonna strike to conduct a detailed survey by district. Right, we wanted to strike that because that's the effort that we believe is already underway with the statewide chart of accounts. And then we are going to strike, after the amounts, we are going to strike that are, just because we didn't think it was required. And then we're going to strike furthermore, mandate the administration.
administration does not fund the General Assembly funds. That's,
And
I'm
then
really surprised
finally,
that you
there
said-
was one other strike through and strike these. So instead of for these social services, it would just be for social services. So this was the revised resolution that the committee provided back to River Valley Tech Center, and Bob responded and said, I understand where you're coming from, but we believe that there's some urgency to this. They don't want to wait for the work being done for the statewide chart of accounts. He thinks it's an equity issue, and so he preferred to leave their resolution as proposed.
Okay, yes?
Is there a timeline on the chart of accounts? I mean, you said they're working on it, is this a 5-year, 3-year, 5-year?
It wasn't supposed to be.
It's supposed to be this year,
Through
July
John
1.
Cole, I think she's more familiar with the status of things.
yeah, so it was supposed to be, not this year, but next year, and they've extended it another year. But districts are moving, the agency does not want to do everyone at once, so there's a lot of these processes are interrelated, so the common chart of accounts is being used to complete the transition to a common software system. So there's both a common definitions of how we account for funds being put into a software module. So the problem is folks have been transitioning to the software system and have encountered difficulties with the software, which is what prompted the request for a delay because business managers were going crazy. My understanding is that the chart of accounts itself is still incomplete, and some business managers and superintendents are pushing back against the agency, asking people to move forward immediately. But the legislative deadline is fiscal year 22 at this point.
Okay, any further discussion? Not, all those in favor of the motion to do not pass? Say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
We'll go back and vote that again. All those in favor of the motion do not pass, raise your hand, please. Six, down hands, opposed.
What about Jim?
Jim? Yeah.
Jim, how do you vote?
I vote for do not pass, consistent with the recommendation.
Do not pass.
The motion.
So that's
Motion
7.
carried 7-5, do not pass. Number 3.
All right, so the good news was, I think that's the most difficult one, we're gonna have to wrestle with, okay? So if we move along, Rutland Town, this one was maintaining current SU governance language. The committee noted, so the recommendation from the committee is do not pass. We did send that to Rutland Town, I did not get a response back. The committee noted there's already an existing VSBA resolution number 1C, and the committee is in favor of a process whereby member districts of an SU may request a waiver from the state board.
And it's the recommendation do not pass. What's the pleasure of the board?
A motion that we do not pass.
Motion made by Gio to do not pass. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Lori. Any discussion or questions? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion is carried, so declare it.
The next one is Addison Northwest. The committee is recommending pass for this. The resolution that you see here has been modified based on the committee's suggestion. I passed that along. I did get a response back from Sue Rakowski from that district, who said that the changes seemed reasonable, and she expects that their board would pass it, but they will pass it at the August 19th meeting. So she asked that we just consider this revised language for the purposes of our voting this evening.
I move that we accept the committee's recommendation to pass.
Okay, move to pass by,
Tamika.
Dan. Second
Second.
by Linda. Is there any discussion or questions? Not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried, so declare.
Moving on to the next one, number 5, Marlboro, Dummerston, and Brattleboro Town related to capital spending. The committee is recommending a position of pass. The committee did get back to, I believe it was Dan's board on this one. The original resolution was a new resolution. The committee recommended that actually we just tack some additional language onto an existing resolution that the VSBA already had in place. Dan's board, or at least I believe the original author, agreed to that change, although I think that you'll still be voting on it somewhat later.
Yes, Marlboro will vote on that actually tomorrow night, and I sent it to the other two boards, Dummerston and Brattleboro, who had originally signed on, and heard back verbally that they agree with the changes. They no longer exist, so it's not possible for them to.
Okay, so then, yeah, what we're looking at tonight is then just the addition of the language irrespective of school district consolidation status onto current resolution 2B number 1.
Okay, what's the pleasure of the board?
I would move that we pass it as amended.
Move,
Accommodation.
pass as presented.
Yeah.
I'll second that.
Motion by Flora, seconded by Gio.
Just
Any discussion?
curious as to, Dan, maybe you could speak to this, why that language was felt necessary to add that?
That, because I have heard rumblings of people saying that they felt like school construction aid should come back around, and it should be, priority should be given to schools which have already been part of, have been merged or consolidated. And I don't feel that's fair. Neither did the people who signed on with it as well. So I feel like every school just needs to be assessed based on its need, if there's going to be construction aid made available.
It's not just a rumor, it was in the bill.
Yeah, it was in the bill,
I couldn't
yeah.
remember, Steve, somebody presented it, I can't remember who it was, but. Yeah.
Okay, any further discussion or questions? Not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried, so declare it.
Next one up, number 6, another one from our friends in Marlboro, Dummerston, and Brattleboro area regarding environmental impact. The committee recommended changes to the resolution that was originally proposed. Those changes you can see in your packet. I believe also in this scenario that your original author agreed to the changes. And so what we see in the packet then is recommended pass by the committee.
I move to accept the committee's recommendation and pass.
I second it.
Motion by Laurie, and seconded by Don to accept the recommendation to pass. Any discussion or questions? Not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion to, those opposed? Motion carried, so declare it.
Next one up from the Meadowy School District. Pretty simple. The committee is recommending a pass for this resolution. I passed that information on, did not hear back from the school district.
I move passage of this one.
Second.
Motion by Don, seconded by Dan to approve the passage of the resolution. Is all those, any discussion? Questions? Not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried, so declared. Yeah, Jim, keep yelling at me.
We heard you that time.
You better vote for that one.
The next one up, number 8 from the West Windsor School District, state ceased unfunded mandates. The committee is recommending a do not pass on this one, noting that the VSBA already has an existing resolution. Number 2K regarding unfunded mandates, sent that response back to West Windsor, and I did not hear back from them.
What's the pleasure of the board?
Motion we do not pass.
Motion to do not pass, is there a second?
Kim,
Second?
Second.
let's let Jim have it.
Motion by Gio, seconded by Jim, is to do not pass. Any discussion or questions? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried, so declare it.
The second one from West Windsor, cease to add non-ed items to the ed fund. Committee is recommending a do not pass on this one. I did not hear back from the school district. Committee noted that the VSBA already has an existing resolution, number 2H, regarding use of the education fund, and recent legislation has decreased competition between the ed fund and the general fund by eliminating a transfer from the general fund to the ed fund.
Okay, what's the pleasure of the board on this matter?
Move to not pass.
Laura moves do not pass, Linda seconds. Any discussion or questions? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion carried, so declared.
Next one comes from Washington Central, which is monitoring outcomes of Act 46. The committee provided some alternative language to Washington Central. We passed that on to Floor. I believe Floor's board agreed to the language, maybe?
Did you write this language?
Huh?
Did we write this language?
No.
No.
It was
okay,
what you had said.
Suggested to change.
Yeah, so
Then,
you,
yeah.
you sent me that package and then
It came
from
back.
that,
Yeah.
it came back. So,
Yeah.
but, and then I sent it to Sue and I said, is that, okay, so our board was not meeting until yesterday, which was gonna be too late, and they authorized the change, as long as the intent was fine,
Got it.
that's
Got it.
what they.
So this is the new proposed language in here?
Yes.
Okay. What's,
And the committee's recommendation for this one is
it's passed.
But we
So,
can
is someone
input.
moving it?
I'll move to pass this resolution.
Laurie, is there a second?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Linda.
I mean, I will note it is pretty strong language
is.
for the VSBA.
Matter of the highest priority, I mean, what does that mean?
Yeah.
In terms of the agency's workload?
Mhm.
Does that mean we say, stop the presses on the Act 173 professional learning plan and turn your attention to this report? I mean, I think is a high priority would convey the message and not necessarily be confusing in terms of staff saying, you know, when we're in the legislature and the agency is saying, we need, you know, I don't know, I just, we're just
Maybe the
doing
time they
it.
use writing silly memos that they can't back up, they could put on things like this.
Well, I want
Yeah.
to say that
I know they're working on it.
because the highest priority is referring to the member school districts, not the agency or anyone else, so I agree with that, that wording. That's just saying, this member school districts, among their highest priorities is that this happens. So, you know, that is our priority as school districts, not agency. So I appreciate that language, and I think it's good.
And I think we meant it in a way that it was more like, if this came up, this is of our highest priority, right? Because his guidance is not like this is gonna, that's how we were seeing it. It's not like it's gonna be somehow prioritized, but if this conversation comes up, it provides guidance to the executive director, right? To,
Right, and so I guess I'm just trying to, in my or future executive directors'
Yeah.
interactions with the agency of education, is the expectation that we say, where's that report? We don't wanna meet with you until you've delivered that report, or, you know, highest priority basically means nothing else happens until that gets done. So I just wanna make sure that it's clear what the expectation is.
I think Dan's statement, I can see how you can interpret it that way, that it's the highest priority for the member districts, not necessarily the highest priority for the agency.
But
Doesn't-
highest priority for the VSBA's interactions with the agency to say, all I wanna talk with you about is, where's that Act 46 report? I'm not gonna talk about the professional learning plan, because as far as we're concerned, that can be backburnered until the Act 46 report comes out.
So
I'm just not clear what is the expectation here with this
That
language in terms of the approach that we would take with the agency of education?
that they follow their own, what, that they had set themselves to do, right? So they had said that they were gonna do this report, that they were gonna be compiling data. As far as we know, we don't know if they're compiling any data or how is that
So
happening.
the law required them to report every year. They
Yeah.
have followed the law and filed a report with the legislature every year. It doesn't, it is at this point been more quantitative
Yeah.
or qualitative,
Qualitative,
not
yeah.
quantitative. And so, you know, anyway, it's not that they haven't done what they've been required to do by the law. It's that maybe it's not what people are looking for. I'm not super clear what folks are, what the expectations are, other than, I think what we had talked about was, and it says here earlier, Act 46 says you have to submit this report. So I think they could say to us, we've done the report.
Yeah, I think it's, in this resolution, there are two ways that it can be considered that it acts, and it's already being done by them, and they would say it is, and yet, some people on this other end are the people that wrote the resolution looking for proof to file in court that the law didn't work because they did it wrong. Is that what they're looking for?
I don't think necessarily that's it yet. For some, that could probably be. It's more about like, you know, finding out what the efficiencies were. Like for all of us to learn about what worked or didn't work, or, you know, if we don't have accurate data, we can't monitor.
Yeah.
So our job is to, so it was meant in a monitoring way, not in a, so it needs to be.
Have to wait a while to see if the things we preached when the mergers actually came about. So, any other discussion on this issue? It gets a little complicated.
If you're ready to go on it, I'm ready to go on it. I was gonna say, that's not our job. Our job is to pass or not pass, and the debate we're having will be held at the annual meeting.
Okay, so the motion was to accept to approve the committee's recommendation. It was made and seconded. We're in discussion phase. You have something, Kim?
I'm just, because we have no opportunity in this space and at this time to alter the wording to say high priority versus highest priority, or to do anything that sort of gets to the concerns that were raised. There's no opportunity for that, right?
That would have to come as an amendment at the
An
annual
amendment
meeting
at the meeting. Okay.
by one of the delegates. Or some member that would, well, some member, that'd probably be a voting member that could make the motion to make that change.
Then can I ask one more question of Nicole?
Certainly.
So as written here, would you understand that we would still expect you to meet with the agency and the secretary on other matters? Should they say, we've done a report?
So this will be a new executive director, you're interpreting this.
I'm
So my
asking your
interpretation is
interpretation.
not better.
No, but I'm
Want
asking
some
you
guidance.
the only thing we got right now.
I would say that the way that this language is written suggests that my position, or this organization's position in discussions with the agency would be, this is the top priority.
Okay? Everyone ready to vote? All those in favor of the motion as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
On opposite, motion's carried, so declare it.
And then the second one from Washington Central regarding fairly distributing debt. We suggested a change in the wording from the original resolution. That change is incorporated in what you see in the packet this evening. And I believe Laura's board agreed to that change. So the committee's position on this is a pass.
I move that we accept the committee's recommendation.
Motion by Dan, second.
Second,
Second by
Christina.
Christine. Any discussion or questions, comments? Not, all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried, so declare it.
The next two resolutions were submitted late. The committee did review them, however, despite the late submittal. You'll see the recommendations do not pass for both, primarily because of the late submission, but for the Wells Spring resolution, we also noted that it conflicts with a current resolution that we have, number 1C, and the committee was in favor of a process whereby member districts of an SU may request a waiver from the State Board of Education.
What's the pleasure of the board on this matter?
Move we do not pass.
Move to do not pass for Gio, is there a second?
I'll second.
Second by Lori.
Is this for 12 and 13 or just 12?
What?
Is this motion for 12 and 13 or just 12?
No, just 12.
Okay.
Any discussion or questions?
Can I ask you a question?
What?
When you're saying that there, and I should have read more clearly, but 1C, members can ask for a waiver. If you're in a new SU, how does that work? So you've got your new boards have been elected, and then someone from another town can say, oh, well, we would prefer to have one.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but if you're in a supervisory union, the law states right now that it's, if you run a school, you get 3 votes. If you don't, you get 1 vote.
Right.
And it has nothing to do with student population or anything, that's what it is. Unless something is mutually agreed to among the board members and approved by the State Board of Education, that it is some different construction, but you have to have the local approval of the local SU board in order to go to the state to get the approval. If you can't get the approval at the local school board level, local SU level, then you can't move to the state. What the resolution that we currently have says we're gonna take that out, so a school board that wants to go to the state board route have the right to go directly to the state board to ask. They don't have to get permission from their local board to do it. Some boards changed their representation, and under the merge, they did it under the Articles of Agreement on what the distribution at the SU would look like in the new SU. That was perfectly legal because then the plan was approved by the state, their plan that submitted that changed those votes. But this was if you were in a Greater Rutland County Supervisory Union and Quarry Valley wanted to change and we voted and said no, they can't. If Royalton wanted to vote to change and his group said no, there's nothing he can do about it at this point other than put the resolution in to have the right to do it. Is that a fair background to what went on, or did I miss something?
No, you've got it right. I just wanted to clarify that the resolution that was approved last year is a little bit broader than that. So the upshot is these 2 proposals would reverse the position taken by the members last year. And the position taken by the members last year was concerns raised by boards who went from 15 reps on an SU board down to 3, and the rest of the SU board was not willing to consider an adjustment to the statutory formula. So they had no way to go to the state board to seek a review of that structure. So the members last year, I'm just going to read the resolution that was approved, said the General Assembly should examine the laws governing supervisory union board structure and the process for waiving the statutory requirements for SU board structure or composition, taking into account issues of fairness, equity, and funding. So on the basis of that resolution, we worked with the Agency of Education on language that was included in the miscellaneous ed bill last year, which didn't go anywhere because of the Act 46 fiasco. So we're on the record as supporting language that would basically allow any member board within an SU to petition the state board to review the structure. So it's basically, it's not mandating what it would look like or that the state board necessarily do anything. And certainly the rest of the SU board members could go to the state board and make a case for why the proposal doesn't work. But it basically gives people a path for review if they're not able to get approval of the majority of the board. So I think that was sort of where the committee landed. we've already sort of, based on last year's action, gone down a road, this would be a dramatic change in course.
Thank you.
Any other questions or discussion on the resolution? If not, the motion to do not pass was made and seconded. Is there, if there's no further discussion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried, so declare it.
And then again, the Quarry Valley resolution is very similar to the last one. We're recommending a position that do not pass, almost for the extent that their item is also covered by current resolution 1C.
Motion we do not pass.
Motion to do not pass,
Second.
seconded by Dan, motion by Gio, seconded by Dan. Is there any discussion or questions? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Aye.
Aye. Motion carried, so declared. That's your report?
I would just follow up by thanking the members that were on the resolutions committee for their work in reviewing these. Oh, sorry, wait, no, I am not done. I am not done. I'm still gonna offer thanks.
But it would be good to start again.
But we had a bunch of existing ones that we wanted to visit as well.
Go ahead. Here I thought we were back on schedule.
I was too, I was too.
Starting to smell good.
I was starting to salivate like Pavlov's dog.
Go ahead, Dan.
So these are in your packet, and you'll see the legend on the very first page. Items that we're recommending for removal or strike through, additions are highlighted in yellow, or discussion highlighted in green. Looking for the first one, Nicole, are you familiar with the
Capital spending?
Board reorg, aye.
board reorganization? Aye.
No,
I'm sorry, recommending for removal.
board organization.
So I don't know if you want to take this one by one, or if you just want to, I mean, these are typically done as a cleanup, part of every year. We do a review to see what's still current, what do we, you know. So, and I think in the past, it's been adopted as sort of a slate of changes. I think what we flagged through the legend is the yellow and strike through are pretty straightforward, and we used to do them, either they were redundant, out of date, or we've already accomplished them. Is that a fair
Yes.
characterization? So I suggest you think about adopting that as a slate of changes. And then the items in green, take one at a time for discussion. This is the way that expedite.
So what's the pleasure of the board here? Is there a motion to do that?
So moved. Please.
Move
So
to
moved to accept the
take the
slate.
strike through and the
strike through in
yellows
yellow.
together as a thing and to approve them?
Yes.
That's the motion by Kim. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Floor. All right. So there's I, there's a strike through, and then the next page is capital spending. There's the last sentence, or part of the last sentence.
You've already approved that.
Yep.
And then the General Assembly is.
Can we just have someone talk to these really quickly and explain why?
I can do that, sure. So the capital spending one on page 4, you've already approved by passing the resolution from Marlboro. Oh,
Or
sorry.
maybe approved.
Suggested that it be passed at the annual
Right.
meeting.
So the board has already
Right,
agreed to
right,
that change.
right.
So about the board reorg, the first one?
The
Or-
first one, that was one where we haven't seen that issue arise requiring that type of a change, and the current law doesn't state that a chair is mandated to serve for 1 year. So we weren't sure where that one came from, but there hasn't been anything done with it. So in the future, what we're proposing is that when we put new resolutions in, we're gonna put the date so that we know how long it's been there, because we're not sure about this one. So if no one has any questions on that, on page 4, we already went over the capital spending one. The next one in yellow is General Assembly. Wherever it said state legislature, we changed it to General Assembly because it was both in here and we just wanted to make things consistent. The next one down on page 4 is E, weighting of students who are English language learners, and that weighting study is in progress, so we didn't feel that language needed to be in there any longer. Next page, page 5 is just that General Assembly change that I already talked about. Page 6, federal funding for K through 12 programs. This one is just has updated language because the Budget Control Act that was mitigating, that was proposing drastic cuts was in the past. So we just updated the language of this generally. Further down on that page, create a task force to establish ratios. That ratios report is now done, so that work is done, so that's strike out. And then further down on 7, on that page, we took out the part that referred to ratios based on that ratios report. And at the bottom of page 6, the part referring to the State Board of Education must complete development of a proficiency-based system. That has been done, so that was struck out. Top of page 7, we just added for clarification, Act 129, you can't really tell what Act 129 is, so we said what it is, which is Vermont's public high school choice law. So there's really no change in the meaning of that, it's just clarifying. Further down on the page, under school choice, again, we changed Act 129 to Vermont's public high school choice law, and legislature to General Assembly. At the bottom of page 7, uniform kindergarten entrance age. The committee noted that the state has determined that a student can be eligible for pre-K at 5 years old, and that they weren't sure what that means in the context of, what this resolution means in the context of universal pre-K, or when this was adopted, so that they're recommending eliminating that. F, school time. The committee felt that this resolution was redundant with H right below school calendar. That it said pretty much the same thing with just a few different words, so they recommend eliminating F. I won't do the green one because we're going to talk about that separately. Further down on the page, under collective bargaining, the committee felt that that language was redundant with A, which is right above it. So recommended eliminating that language. Page 10, under data collection and reporting, this language was updated to reflect the current situation. The No Child Left Behind Act doesn't exist anymore. It's the Every Student Succeeds Act. So that language was changed. We also changed State Department of Education to the Agency of Education. And that is all, except for the green ones, which you're going to do separately.
Okay, you have pleasure before you of the thing. We have a motion to accept the recommendations of the committee. I take it you're recommending these changes?
We are.
Clean up. Is there a motion to that effect?
I made it, and Laura seconded.
You recommended it?
Yeah, I
Yes.
made it. And
Second?
I second it.
Seconded? All right. Motion made and seconded. Is there any other questions or comments on this? If not, all those in favor?
I just
Oh,
Yes.
I have one question, because we've grappled with our firearm safety zone in our community, is that there's many private residences within 500 feet of the school, so then.
So we're gonna get
We-
to that.
yeah, we
Okay,
have-
that's
we're
not.
talking about this.
Sorry.
And I just wanted to ask, does it matter, we're just gonna renumber all these,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
It doesn't, we don't have to worry about that.
Yeah,
So
that's
it's gonna
just
get-
formatting after
Right.
the conference, we'll reform everything.
Okay.
All right, any other questions? Not all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Aye.
Motion carried, so declare it. Okay, now, we have the green ones. Early education firearm safety zone, were they the only two green ones?
Yes. Would you like me to talk about the early education?
Yeah, what's the recommendation?
So the committee talked about the fact that pre-K will likely be taken up by the legislature next session, and wondered whether this resolution provided the appropriate guidance. The last sentence basically means VSBA supports a mixed delivery system. So we wanted to draw that to the board's attention for you to take a look at.
So we had a fair amount of discussion in January last year about the collective analysis that was done by the partner organizations around the flaws in our current universal pre-K program. The board never took a position, but there seemed to be a fair amount of enthusiasm for exploring the prospects for kindergarten to be defined as 4- and 5-year-olds and delivered through public schools. I think it's just important to flag for you that the committee didn't make a recommendation on whether or not to change it, but that last sentence could be interpreted to tie our hands in terms of advocating for expansion of publicly. It doesn't, if the interpretation is, in some instances, public programs can't exist, there are large swaths of the Northeast Kingdom where there are not public schools, then private providers should fill the role there. But I just wanted to circle back from the conversation we had in January. It doesn't necessarily sync up with the language in that last sentence.
And I know no dates are attached to these, but does anybody know when this was spelled out? If this was last year's resolution, that's only a year ago, but if it was.
It was
10 or
2013, I believe.
So about 6 years ago then.
Yeah, it was around the time 160, it was
Right.
predated my time as executive director, but I was here. And it, I think, supported the development of 166 and how that construct.
So
Which was,
thinking
that's a
they-
multiple presentation to, that's private and public
Right, it's what we call the mixed delivery system.
mixed delivery system. Yeah.
Having talked
Yeah, I
to.
think,
Let him go.
Go ahead, Jim.
yeah, this is a high priority item down in my neck of the woods. And, I think, just honestly, my reading of it is there is discussion of a dual delivery, which, we've got in so many different places. And it isn't really suggesting that it should be exclusively public or exclusively private. I don't think it's reading it, to me, it isn't reading as if we favor one over the other, but they both have, can have a role. And, we're actually, in our SU, we have our hands tied expanding our public programs because we have good private programs. But at the same time, we don't actually want to kill the private programs because they provide a lot to our communities.
Right.
I think, something, Nicole raised a really good point, which is, the idea of the, splitting off, essentially the 4-year-olds versus the 3 and younger. And, that's something that was discussed and I think, might need to be considered a lot more. But, dealing with the dual oversight of AOE or education and human services. But, this is a big issue.
I
And it's kind of hard to, right now it's kind of, I don't think it's overly strong in any direction. And I'm not sure we're ready to make it overly strong in any direction. I don't know.
We can keep this discussion going for a little while, but if we're gonna either take no action or we're gonna take some action on this, we gotta have a recommendation, and your supper's getting cold.
Motion we strike the last sentence.
Motion by Gio to strike the last sentence.
You had someone speaking earlier, Clarence, Linda was gonna say something, I'd like to hear what she was gonna say.
Well, I've talked to people in private pre-Ks, because I did read through this, and part of the feeling is, when you guys didn't have anything, we came forward and we provided some pre-K stuff, and now you want us to back. We're feeling like you don't want us anymore, we don't want to, and I'm talking to parents also in my district, and they're saying, I think we should have some say into these little guys. We go along with a lot with the public education, but when it comes to the 3 and 4-year-olds, they're still babies, and we'd like to have say into whether they have to go into, and we'd like to a lot of the people I talked to said, we'd like to be a partner with public. We don't want to, and that's just, I'm just paraphrasing some of the things that they, that the people, and we think we provide a really good program. Maybe our programs aren't all day because parents don't want to send the kids all day. So there was some discussion from some of the people that I spoke to.
Okay, but
I'm just
we
throwing that
have we have a motion from Gio to strike the last sentence. Is there a second to his motion?
A second.
Seconded by
Adrian.
Adrian. All right. Discussion about this, any further discussion or any questions?
Well, since I was talking before, I'll just kind of, getting rid of the last sentence wouldn't necessarily say we are, hostile to private providers. However, like in our area, we are really trying very hard to work out a way for them to coexist.
Okay.
And we kind of come to the conclusion that's the best for our kids.
Okay.
So
Dan?
just procedurally, so would we be recommending that at the annual meeting that this be struck, or would we be striking this now?
Oh, no, it still needs to be approved by the members.
Right,
So
so
it
this
would
is
be part of
just
the
a-
board's report to the membership, would be to modify this specific by striking the last sentence, but it would need to be approved by the members.
Okay. Gio?
Yeah, so I agree with what Jim's assessment is. We're not saying you can't be a private provider. It's not an anti-private provider statement, but we're sort of pulling back on this, saying things like they should play a significant role. So it's not a, they shouldn't be there. It's not a statement like that. It's just a statement of let's rethink how we're.
You're like saying it could be a private.
Could be.
Could be,
That's-
but not that
Well,
it had to
change it
be.
to just say that public should play a major role,
Okay. Christine?
I'd be much more in favor if we just got rid of the words "and should," because then it appears to be more neutral. Private providers that meet high standards can play significant roles as partners. And so that, getting rid of the words "and should," make it a more neutral sentence, I think, versus getting rid of the
I
words.
like that change.
And should. So the motion is to strike the whole last sentence, and you'd like to modify that to just take
I'm making a motion that we,
amendment?
an amendment to the motion that we add back everything but "and should" in the last sentence.
And should, okay. So now we're going to just discuss the amendment if there's a second to it.
I'll
Is there a second
second
to the amendment? Motion seconded the amendment by Linda. All right, this discussion on this, that the wording of the last sentence gets added back in, minus the 2 words, "and should." Any discussion or questions about that?
I just have a question of Nicole. Is that I know you know the situation in the legislature, et cetera, with, with different folks. Is this, I assume this ties into how we're able to potentially influence what's done there. What's your view on the "and should" being dropped?
I think this resolution as written, so with or without "and should," but that the emphasis on private providers as partners, I think would require this association to think very carefully about positions it would take on pre-K that would in any way limit the current standing of private providers in the system. Which is, I think, the direction we were going. And when we did this review, I felt it was the responsible thing to do to call to your attention. We've highlighted a lot of concerns about the way the system is working right now. This seems to tie our hand. It basically elevates the interests of public and private and holds them equal in terms of this association's advocacy.
Okay?
So getting rid
I'm
of the
not
full
sure.
second sentence, you feel would be give us more flexibility in arguing for the ability to build public programs.
Right, I don't think we're ever gonna get rid of private providers in the system. They have a lot of influence, a lot of advocacy behind them. Eliminating that sentence makes clear that this organization is looking out for the interests of the public school districts and the children that they serve.
Okay, so we're talking.
Right now, it's a little bit like, we need to make sure both entity, or both interests are at the table and,
So can I just say something? I just want to say that I think the most important sentence is the one before. The school district should play a central role in assuring quality and accountability in publicly funded early education programs, which means that we are still could be using a voucher for a private education, right? So that is the sentence that we don't want to lose, so I just wanted to speak against putting it
That
back.
discussion is kind of for the whole motion.
But I was just speaking
The
against
amendment is
putting it
pretty
back.
specific on what we do. So if anybody wants to speak to just deleting those two words, good. If not, we're going to vote on whether that's going to happen or not.
I think in echoing Flora's, bringing my attention to that, Flora helped me see that we are not precluding involvement in publicly funding quality privates. In, let's say we had a model that was 4-year-olds are all public school and 3-year-olds are vouchered. That is allowed for and could be advocated for in all the other sentences. And I am going to vote against just putting everything back in and taking out those two words, because I think I'm appreciating the conflict of interest that would prevent us from limiting private providers for 4-year-olds, which I think, is
Okay.
where public can pick it up.
Adrian?
Yeah, I just wanted to say there are communities that have no privates. I know that's hard to believe. And I absolutely do not want to preclude having a public program that works for 3- and 4-year-olds. And I would hate to see us advocate, saying, sorry, step up.
Okay. Any other discussion on the amendment? Not all those in favor of the amendment?
Are we getting any pushback from those advocates that are truly early education advocates for taking this out?
well, they don't know about it.
Okay, then. I'm just wondering if there's gonna be any crap hitting the fan because of this.
Who knows?
I think it's all about
We
how
were-
you explain it.
Okay.
Okay.
My guess is they, just what they, that they don't actually know about it. And I do think though that, we were having a lot of discussions with legislators on, trying to push forward some changes on these issues. And I think, hearing Nicole's point, I think, personally, I'm kind of flip-flopping here, but I'm going to, deleting the whole last sentence, I think, might be in our best interest to give us the most flexibility to try to come up with a good solution.
Okay. So let's have the vote on the amendment first, is to add the sentence back in and take out those two words. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed?
Nay.
The nays have it. All right, now we're going to vote on the motion, the original motion, yes?
I have another amendment. That's, we'll accept it, you're the chair.
Yeah.
I would keep only the first sentence. I would strike, after simplicity, I would strike everything. I spent hours, days, weeks negotiating the first early ed bill. Back about 10 or more years ago, I'd have to check my log. And I'm gonna tell you, I think politically, if this is on the record for my last year's resolutions, right?
No, this is 2013 or 12.
2013,
Yeah.
I was even after I was there. I just think that this is a hot button issue. I think it's one of those issues where we're gonna get caught in a political whiplash, whatever you wanna call it, backlash. If I was going, I'd either leave it alone or I'd just leave the first sentence and then take a stand.
All right, so you're making an amendment to delete everything after the first sentence.
After simplicity.
Okay, is there a second to that amendment?
I'll second it.
Seconded by Linda, therefore the amendment is there. All right, any discussion on, Don spoke to it, does someone else want to speak to it? Or pro or con? Therefore, all those in favor of the amendment as proposed, say aye.
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 Those opposed?
Nay.
Abstain.
Let's do it again. All those in favor of the amendment, raise your hand, please. Jim?
I'm a nay.
Nay, all right.
Aye.
All those opposed? The amendment is lost. So now we're back to the original amendments, delete the last sentence.
What was the number on that?
5 to 7 is the way I counted, 5 to 8. It's enough, so it was a difference.
With at least 2 abstentions.
Two abstentions.
You got a corner over here that
Can't make up his mind.
the whole corner, it's not just.
I just
You don't wanna
counted
be
the
in the
hands
hot
that are
seat
up,
when
you
they
know?
call.
Like I told you in the beginning, I don't call for extensions. If you want to abstain, feel free, just let me know, and we'll get it in the record. Otherwise, we're
I think, yeah, Don had a good point, but at the same time, I think we kind of need to make some statement about the public role.
Okay, so the motion on the floor is to delete the last sentence. That was the original motion. Any further discussion on that? Not all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried, so declared.
Motion opposed, he cut us off, we said no.
No, there were a couple no's, but the ayes have it. All right, now, two things. The food is getting cold. Do we want to finish this debate afterwards?
After.
After supper?
I'll make a motion.
Gun control is something that we don't need to hash out.
On an empty stomach.
Give everybody an injection. Therefore, seconded by Lori.
So Gio made a motion to strike the firearms safety zone, and it was
Yes.
seconded by
Lori.
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 Any discussion or questions? Comments?
So,
Go ahead, Kevin.
is there any current requirements or restrictions on firearms around schools?
Yes, there's a lot of federal and state law around school campuses. This basically extends a 500-foot perimeter beyond the school campus, which is not currently covered by state or federal law.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes?
Is this something that a town or a village could do on their own? If they felt strongly about extending the safety zone around their school?
Yes, they would probably, I mean, there's Second Amendment issues associated with this. So I think, Christina, you raised the fact that there are private landowners that have property adjacent to school property.
And our school property is huge in one town, so it's a long way from a school building, and it's a long way from a playing field. So 500 feet from something that's a half a mile from a school building that was where we were struggling with this.
Right. So I think a local board could adopt, a select board could potentially adopt something like that. I think there'd probably be a reluctance to do so given the high likelihood of being sued. Legislature is in a better position to pass a law, be sued, be defended by the Attorney General than a town.
Any other comments?
I just wanted to bring, the reason that this had come up in our town, and it was supported by the other towns in our area that you talked to them at the supervisory union meetings, just because we weren't merged at that point, was because in our situation, we don't have a huge campus. We have adjoining landowners. Shrewsbury is a pretty rural community. A lot of people like to target shoot. Now that kids are at school until 5:30 in the evening, there was at least one situation, and actually a second one had happened since then, that wasn't as egregious, but that people were target shooting, but not in like a regular way so that it was obvious that it was target shooting. There were just guns going off, very close to the school building. Kids were still there, they were outside, they got ushered inside in an emergency basis. School was locked down, it took an hour and a half for a state trooper to come up and respond and find out what was going on. And it was a horrendous situation. The landowners adjoining the school didn't care and said, we're allowed to have guns and we can shoot them if we want. The fact that they were shooting them into a body of water to scare beavers didn't seem to make any impression on them that it was stupid.
Are you saying you can't fix stupid?
Apparently in that situation, we could not.
Move it to text.
So I would not be opposed to rewording it in some way that would protect situations like where you're talking about where there's large children. But I do think that it is something very reasonable for us, given the current climate and how scared people are in schools these days. They are targets. And to have guns going off in close proximity to a school building is terrifying. And I think, I mean, I personally still support this. I would also support having it somehow be reworded so that it's, 500 feet from playing fields or school buildings or whatever, for places that have 50 acres or whatever that belongs to the school. But I do see it as something that the VSBA could lead on, because little towns are not, I know our select board would never, say anything. One of those, it just wouldn't happen.
You mean they might be doing the shooting?
No, they didn't, but they just would think they wouldn't want to get involved in the conversation.
Mm-hmm. Okay, any other comments on the issue? Yeah.
So leaving it on the books, Nicole, in that it's not otherwise being taken up, it requires we take an advocacy position versus having a position there. Should the firearms conversation ignite in some way to provide guidance how we respond to it?
Yeah, I mean, I don't have strong feelings about the need to eliminate it. I just wanted everyone to be aware that we're not, this would, engaging in launching a campaign around gun advocacy would require some substantial organizational resources and just fortitude, frankly. And we're not doing that right now. So that's, if everyone's fine with that and it's just here, just in case the issue comes up, great. But it's our job to sort of do a review of these and let you know we're not actively engaged in this issue, and I'm not sure this specific issue, firearm safety, will likely continue to be a conversation.
Okay, Kim?
Again, this is, I'm thinking back, was it last year or the year before, where firearm safety was a major conversation after the Parkland shooting. Student voice came to that conversation pretty dramatically. This would have provided us guidance on how to engage around that conversation. We wouldn't have necessarily needed to lead on it. I'm just trying to think of a real life situation. It was on our books, wasn't it?
Oh, yeah, but this would not, we had other resolutions offered that were more specific to the current issues.
Do we have,
But
what else?
they were not
This
passed.
is, this I feel like is a
They were not
very
passed.
narrow, very specific
Okay.
request. It's not general
Yeah.
gun safety. We couldn't get the gun safety resolution passed.
That's my reluctance to
Yeah.
have us remove anything related to gun
Yeah,
safety, I
I
guess,
agree.
to be honest.
So the-
Because that was what I was trying to remember, if we had anything else that speaks to gun
So the-
safety.
The motion on the floor is
No, but
just,
I would not, you read this as authorizing us to
Okay.
sign on to gun legislation because we had a debate of the members specific to that and that proposition failed.
there's no
All
issue.
we have authorization for is this specific firearm safety zone, which is 500 feet.
So if this comes out and the issue comes up of gun safety, you'll come to this board and ask for, do we support this bill or not? When there's something comes up, because there won't be anything on the books for guidance.
If there's a Moms Demand Safe School Zones coalition and they want a bill that sort of touches upon these issues, we would be able to enter the conversation with this kind of a recommendation. We do not have direction and authorization from the members to engage in a broader discussion about gun safety.
Okay?
That resolution failed last year.
So the motion over this is to delete this. Or the recommendation is to delete it. Any further questions?
The recommendation was to discuss it. Yeah.
No.
Motion.
So, right, sorry.
Yeah.
My
Sorry.
mistake.
Okay.
Sorry. My mistake.
It was moved to delete it. Or the recommendation is to delete it. All right? That's what you're voting on. All those in favor of that say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Nay.
Nay. Nays have it. So it stays in. That's the end of the recommendations, correct? All right.
Clarence, at the risk of extending this conversation, could we do similar to what we did with the last one, just consider rewording this? I mean, I think similar to what Don proposed last time, I think we could reword a one-sentence thing that would allow Nicole or whoever it is to engage with gun safety issues in school.
Well, we could, except the motion's been made to take a definite action and it's already been voted and had. We would have had to suggest that as an amendment before we vote on it. Now at this point, the recommendation goes to board. It's gonna have to come up at the annual meeting and someone's can amend the language on the floor at the annual meeting. You know, that's where it becomes, that's your next avenue to deal with that, all right? That would be my interpretation of it,
So just as a reminder, if people have additional resolutions that they want the body to consider that were not submitted ahead of time, they can bring them to the floor with sufficient copies and then 2/3 majority if the members present needs to vote to take it up, you know, that's sort of the process for, and I suppose you could also, I don't think you would make an amendment to the slate of changes being approved here. It would, if it's not consistent with what's being read, that would put it into the, you're bringing something.
well, the two green ones are two separate ones that aren't the whole other
Right.
business, so
Right.
it would be changing that. All right, now move on, we're looking to the report from the executive committee. First things that we wanted to discuss, the long and short of it is, the first thing we need to do is we're going to be reviewing and voting on the budget. We'll get to these bylaw changes, appointments, and the search process.
Weren't we gonna do number
Yeah,
4
5.
first with bylaws? You wanted to do that?
5 first.
Yeah.
5 first, before 4.
Oh, okay,
We're reversing the order of those
Right.
two.
so it wasn't the budget.
Okay, bylaw changes?
Bylaw, yeah.
All right, so we'll do the bylaw changes, or that would be the, like, the next page, or we
It's
just
gonna
got
be
through.
after the financials, after the budget documents in your packet. It's the track changes.
Okay,
Okay.
And again, these, do you want me to?
yes, go ahead.
So any changes to the bylaws need to be approved by the members at the annual business meeting. And so these changes are being recommended by the executive committee that in order to be consistent with discussions that you had at your June retreat around regional organization. There are a couple of sort of minor cleanup. So on page 1, everybody there, everybody have the bylaws? So because we're already into the dues transition, we're striking beginning in FY '18 since we're well beyond there. The second page, their terms of office shall begin at the adjournment of the annual meeting. That is old language from when officers were elected by the members at the annual meeting. That is no longer the process that is used. The board elects their own officers, the members do not elect the officers of the board. So that was sort of old language that got lost in terms of a cleanup that should have happened a couple of years ago. Again, the next page is some cleanup.
Actually, I have a question about that first one, Article 7 there. I'm wondering how Geo fits into that. Past, president, only members of school boards shall be eligible to serve. Maybe that one, that requisite shouldn't be for the immediate past president. Because if I understand it right, Geo, you're not currently a school board member.
That's
is that
correct.
So on the next page, it talks about the immediate past president serving on the executive committee, and then the immediate past president will serve for 1 year after the expiration of their presidency.
Maybe the language of Article 7, it seems to me that immediate past president is covered by only those persons who are members of the school board shall be eligible to serve in the above offices. Seems to me there's a conflict there.
Policy-wise, we've always dealt with it, that the past president doesn't need to be a board member, but I understand what you're
Because it
saying.
directly addresses, states immediate past president in the preceding sentence. Yep. So you could add a clause to the beginning of only those persons. You could say with the exception of the immediate past president.
Right, or something like that, yeah.
Because I think there's value in terms of organizational continuity.
Oh, yeah.
And it's only a 1-year term, with the exception of the immediate past president.
So shall I read
That's in
that?
order to be, that is in
Don't
order
forget
to
to
I just trying to get the language to allow you to stay.
Consistent
with.
practice.
But when it passes, I'll be leaving.
Thank you, Dan. That's
Because my year will be
By
up.
that time, it'll be done.
Thank you, Dan. That was a
That's a good catch.
very helpful catch. The next page, members don't approve policies at the annual meeting. They approve bylaws at the annual meeting. And the second or the last sentence in that paragraph, members of the board of directors are the regional representatives, so there's no additional regional representatives. And then, so the big, and the meat here is the changes to the regions. So for those of you who are just joining us for this conversation, last year the members adopted a resolution calling on the VSBA board to examine current regional boundaries with an eye to updating them. And they gave some considerations. We had a committee that decided to survey the membership and ask them to rank criteria that would be used for making changes to our regional structure. The top 2 criteria, as you know, I can't remember how many people responded to that survey. We can get you that. We covered all this stuff in the retreat. Were geography and student population. The committee then did an analysis of student population within current regions, and found wide disparities, particularly with Chittenden County vis-a-vis the rest of the state. And I don't have the figures exactly, but it was
21,606 students and 8 board members. That was Chittenden.
8 board, so they only have 2 reps, let me just, 8 boards.
8 boards,
Eight
sorry,
boards.
8 boards, yeah.
Yeah,
With 2 represented in our board.
right. And there were some regions that had, 1,200 students and 2 boards and 2 reps on the board. And so in the interest of being responsive to those criteria, the board agreed to a recommendation from the committee, which was to split Chittenden into 2 regions. Move Grand Isle to Franklin, because that, they're more geographically oriented in some respects to one another. And break apart, and do you have, that's not the,
I thought
we
that
had
was not
the
the
one
new
with the recommendation, but it can be useful, I think. So breaking apart Orange, Washington, and creating a central Vermont region, which would include the Lamoille region and essentially the western districts in Orange, Washington. And then Orange East would be part of a Southern Kingdom region, and then there would be a Northern Kingdom region. This is something the board discussed at length at the retreat. So really all the executive committee did was come up with some names. And the proposal is to strike language that refers to counties and just name the regions. And so you'll see that it's Addison and Bennington remain unchanged. You will have the Kingdom South, a Western Chittenden and an Eastern Chittenden, Franklin, Grand Isle, Central Vermont, Kingdom North, Rutland, Wyndham, and Windsor. It would mean that we have the same number of regions, but the districts in Chittenden County would have more representation. A couple other pieces, I guess, of information for you. We have scheduled regional meetings in every single region this year. We had been doing them in 7 regions and sort of combining regions in the interest of Carrie's sanity and a time calendar, quite frankly, and it's more expensive. Yeah, I mean, it just, so, but we felt that discussion of changing the regions requires us to be present in every region. And so this is going to be on the agenda for the regional meetings for discussion, so people can ask questions and we'll be able to show the data and sort of, you asked us to do this, we did our best, you get to decide.
So Nicole, can I
Yeah.
ask, so the regional meetings you have scheduled are in the previous?
Yes,
region,
the old ones.
Not
Yes,
the new ones?
that's correct.
The new ones won't exist until after the annual meeting if approved.
Well, and they wouldn't go into effect immediately, it would be the following year. So people who are currently representatives would get to continue to serve, but we would need to make some changes in terms of board representation for the following year. Or you all would have to do that. And then the other piece of information, is that the way our dues structure, I think there was some comfort, there was discomfort in terms of expanding the number of seats dedicated to Chittenden County for obvious reasons. And comfort with the fact that now that our dues are based on student population, it's conceivable that some folks in the Chittenden County districts who arguably are being asked to cover a greater proportion of the association's expenses, that be reflected in representation on the board. So, but again, this is for the members to sink their teeth into, talk about, and vote on at the annual meeting. The last change,
I'm sorry, will you have an updated map online which shows, because we would be affected and we're.
yes, so as part of the packets that would go, we would have current and proposed.
Okay,
And then there's one more pretty substantial change on the next page, which is to change our fiscal year, which we've been talking about for a little while. I don't know why we have a September 1 fiscal year. We are the only organization in the building that has a September 1 fiscal year. It's different from the building organization's fiscal year. It's different from our funders' fiscal year, so it has caused some headaches, to say the least. If you're going to change to a July 1 fiscal year to be consistent with the rest of the world, you need to have a plan to do that. That's not the kind of thing that happens overnight. So this just sets us on a path to be able to do that for your FY22 budget.
those are the recommendations of the bylaw committee to, for this, and they're up to the board. Hopefully the board will approve them, but put them before the annual meeting.
So moved.
So moved by Dan. Is there a second? Seconded by Kim. Any discussion or questions about these? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried, so declare. I've been remiss since the very beginning of the meeting, and there's so much that happens along the way that you kind of forget about things, but since, excuse me, since we were all sitting together, you all got notified that our executive director is leaving us. We can't, just let that pass, Well, that was news the end of July, it's the 15th of August here, but this is the first time the board's got together since it's with very mixed emotions that this happens. It's a tough job, and as you will see, we will get to.
It sucks.
That's one nice way of putting it. But, it's.
You are good.
She's moving onto be in the education field, an education attorney with a firm in Burlington, and some of us even hire that firm now to do our legal work, so we'll be gone, but we'll just get to pay a higher price per hour. But we'll still have her expertise and she'll know us all, so it's our loss and their gain will still be our gain too, so. But it adds a lot of, I should have mentioned that at the beginning of the meeting, I'm sorry I didn't. We owe her a debt of gratitude for 8 years of very dedicated service that has moved this organization. Took a very positive going organization and moved it along and made it even better.
Yes, you did.
Thank you, Nicole.
We're gonna have plenty of time for goodbyes. Business to take care of. I'm not gonna give a speech now.
BI board appointments. That's what we have on here. We have a service agreement.
So that's a little bit different. You
But
probably don't remind.
that's in here, but no, we have.
This is from the June executive committee meeting, so this is ancient history. Give it all that's happened to the last month.
Or someone's resigned from the board.
Yes, and you appointed somebody to replace.
And we appointed
So,
Gio, right?
no, that's a
No,
different,
that's a different.
So, just to back up, Act 11 charged the VSBA with two things. Appointing 3 members to the VHI board, which is the board that oversees the health insurance program in collaboration with the Vermont NEA. This board has decided to delegate that responsibility to the executive committee. So the executive committee makes the VHI board appointments. The initial round of appointments were basically the 3 members that were currently serving were reappointed to continue serving in the interest of organizational continuity. So I'll pause there and say the other obligation is to appoint members to the 5-member bargaining commission. That responsibility rests with the full board. You're gonna get to that a little bit later tonight. The full board appointed Elizabeth Fitzgerald to serve on the bargaining commission. She had been serving on the VHI board, so she resigned from the VHI board to do that. She was replaced by someone, a former school board member, who quickly came to realize that it was too big of a commitment in terms of his time as a professor at St. Michael's College, and it just became, and frankly, not connected enough with the day-to-day operations to really be able to work well with the team. So he submitted his resignation in June, and the board appointed Superintendent John Pandolfo, who was on he's been very engaged in this work, as his replacement. And his first meeting is August 26th. He's getting ready, up to speed and ready to go. He participated in the healthcare bargaining commission work, the original legislative task force looking at the issues, so he's quite familiar with the VHI changes and feels like he has the time to plan.
That's the one the executive
Has the time.
committee appointed,
He's
right?
local.
He's currently a superintendent.
He is currently a superintendent, so our representatives right now all are beneficiaries of the VHI program. They all have the health plans, same as the teachers who are on the board. You know, the challenge that we have is that the board meets, well, we have a lot of challenges with that board, which we should probably talk about at a different date. Keeping people on that board is going to be very, very difficult because it's very long meetings. They are increasingly contentious, actions not being taken, et cetera. And so we need to be pretty strategic about who we ask
So did
fill that role and how they are supported
so the executive committee appointed him in June?
after the retreat
Yeah.
at their
Yeah,
meeting.
at their-
Yeah.
The reason I ask is I had applied, and showed an interest in that, applied the first time around.
No, you applied for the bargaining commission.
No, I applied at the bargaining initially, but I applied for that. And the reason on the bargaining, it was because after I applied, I heard that there was going to be only one from our region, and therefore having Chittenden County in our region certainly did not give us a chance. I mean, and Elizabeth, I think, was a wise choice.
Right.
Thanks, but anyway, but I did submit an application for that, and that's okay. I just question whether somebody's a full-time superintendent can really give it the attention that it deserves. But the decision's been made, and that's fine.
Yeah, so we don't have applications. We've sort of reached out to people, so I'm sorry, Don, I
No,
missed that
and-
somehow.
Most people here don't realize it because I've been around so long, but when VI started with all of the people in the beginning from St. Mike's and John and Jim and Joe and all those people, my district was actively involved. I was actively involved, and my business manager was the president of that organization. So it's not like I just became involved
Right.
with it. That's okay.
Right.
So the executive committee of this board appointed Superintendent John Pandolfo to start, what is it? Pandolfo. To go on what board?
The VHI
The VHI
board,
board.
which oversees the health insurance
Right,
program.
okay.
It
Well,
should be
sure.
really boring stuff.
Okay.
It should be, you
But
set the
there's
premium
contentious-
rates,
Yeah.
you make sure the reserves are healthy. Unfortunately, they don't even have a budget in place for fiscal year that started over a month ago.
Haven't been able to agree to approve the minutes from
Because
months
the
ago.
board can't agree?
Correct.
Oh, moly.
But isn't
The
that more
legislature
Sori's
set up a
organization?
3-3 board,
Oh, my God.
despite lots of testimony that that's not a recipe for success, that maybe they ought to appoint a neutral 7th. Well, we should set aside some time in September to talk about
Okay,
that situation.
we've got to keep rolling here, but we just wanted
So
to
that's an
report that
update.
information
That's
to
an
you,
update, yep.
because you need to be updated, and so you know, And now we move on to the executive director search process. And the executive committee met, and we have a proposal, several proposals for the board that we would like your approval for. Okay. One is, we've looked around at some consultants, someone to help with the search, headhunters you will, or whatever. We find they're very expensive. There's a lot of money. We don't think that that's particularly a good way to go in their scope of work and so forth on what we want and varying things. So what we would like to do is get approval to amend the budget that you're going to get proposed to you, to take $10,000 of unrestricted money and to move it into the budget so that the search committee, if when they get everything figured out, does need some consulting work, they have some money with a floor on it. They don't intend to spend the whole business, but that's what we're getting is 10,000 is above for bids on an hourly basis. So I don't believe the search committee intends to go that far, but we would like, before we approve the budget, to have the money there. You can't just take it out of, if nothing's budgeted for it, we just can't pay the bill and short somebody else. So that was the idea of switching places with these, is we would like the board to approve using $10,000 of additional funds, unrestricted money, be moved into the budget for the purpose of the hiring process.
Is there a committee up for hiring at this point?
We will get there in about 30 seconds, but if we could take care of the money first, one at a time, to walk through these things structurally and probably. Please.
I made that motion.
You made the motion to amend the budget to take $10,000 of the unrestricted money and put it in the budget.
Yep.
By Adrian. Is there a second?
A second.
Second by Christine. Get it right after a while. Christine to approve that. And now are there questions about just that part of it?
When you looked at costs, how much did search firms need?
One bid says a minimum of $10,000 is going to be the cost, and it's $190 an hour, and they're suggesting about that. The number of days to come up with that figure.
Okay,
So if we lessen their workload, we're still got to pay them $10,000. So that,
Yep.
the executive committee didn't think that was a great idea. We just can't wait 1 month to get the authorization to pay someone, all right? That is why we're asking for that now. Any other questions about that? Yes, Dan?
So this is a budget under which we're currently operating. We have some unrestricted funds, and we're simply moving 10,000 of those from unrestricted into an expendable item. Do we have to approve the entire budget, or are we currently operating under this?
Well, you're going to approve a budget here and under the Finance Committee for 2020, because we start with our budget year September 1 right now. This money's not going to get expended until into the new budget year on the budget we're approving. We just want to put it in the budget that we're asking to be approved, so it'll be there. Kim can explain it better, but you get the money moved to where it belongs, so it'll be expendable.
The budget that's in the packet doesn't have a line item for this expenditure, so we would be adding the expenditure, and at the bottom of the budget, to balance the budget out, there's a line item that is a movement of unrestricted funds. That would increase by 10,000. We have, in the sheet that got passed around when you all got here, is our balance sheet, and our unrestricted funds balance is 85,961. The budget currently is calling for about 7,000, so it would be about 17,000 that we would be looking for. This year, we had expected to have moved more unrestricted funds than we needed to, so I would imagine that might end up being the case, but to propose a budget to the membership that doesn't include a line item for an expense we know we're gonna have didn't feel right. We also feel as though the scope of what the consultants provided us for that minimum of 10,000 is greater than the scope of the work, but we'd like to have the cap that allows us some flexibility to have some consulting services that wouldn't exceed that 10,000, so.
I guess my only question is, why don't we just make this when we're approving the budget?
So we wanted to discuss it with you all, ask for the approval to expend not more than 10,000 for this purpose. Then we will amend the budget when we get, that's why we switched the order.
Got it.
We'll amend the budget when we get to that, or whatever the words are we're supposed to use to do that. We are going to approve a budget that will include that line item that will have been amended from what you received in your packet.
Okay?
Can I just clarify one thing?
Yeah.
Kim said something about, the members don't approve the budget.
Oh, I'm sorry.
This is the
This
only,
is-
this is the
okay.
item, the board
This
approves
is
this
after-
tonight.
Now for a September 1
for
start.
September
I
1.
apologize, yeah.
That's okay, just wanted, for the record.
Thank you. No,
Any other
exactly.
questions?
Maybe.
If not, all those in favor of the motion? Aye. Those opposed? Motion's carried, so declare. Okay, that was one item. Now, the rest of the search process, we'd like authorization from the executive committee, like authorization to appoint a search committee. We'd like it to consist of at least 2 executive committee members and at least 2 members from the board. We'd like people to volunteer who would like to be considered to be appointed that position. We believe the search committee will be a 5-member board. It'll be 2 and 2, plus 1 member of the staff, and Carrie has agreed to be that member of the staff. So we have that representation of the staff. And the 5 people, there will be a significant time commitment here. We have a rough outline, well, it's more than rough, but it's got to be here to make this happen by early October is going to be a monumental task. But we feel it needs to be done as quickly as possible because we need to get a replacement for Nicole, because there's going to be a gap to get people up to speed. It's just going to happen. And so we want to mitigate that as much as possible and plan on how we're going to cover that loss, whether we contract with Nicole or somebody else to make that happen, or things that this committee needs to deal with. So the board would like the authority to appoint that 5-member search committee.
Make a motion to appoint a 5-member search committee.
Consisted as 2, 2, and 1?
As 2, 2, and 1, 2 exec, 2 board, and Carrie.
Okay, is there a second to that?
Second.
Second by Dan.
Motion by Linda.
Seconded by Dan. Is there any discussion or questions about that? Any one of the executive committee like to expound on that? Is it explained good enough?
I have a question.
Yeah.
Are there members of the board who are interested in serving on the hiring committee? Because if you don't have 2 people that are ready,
Yeah, we would.
willing to do it, and you've set up a structure that requires that,
Yeah.
and you can't find anybody to fill it, that's potentially problematic. So, anybody around the table? Just sort of gauging the interest.
I've always thought that was interesting.
Can we ask the same of the executive committee? I mean, they have chosen.
Good point.
Let's hear from them too.
The thing is, the executive committee could have more members, but we just didn't want to keep it completely in-house. We wanted to provide an opportunity for the general membership of the board to take part in this, so it's not our canned view, so to speak. We're trying to open it up a little and be as transparent as possible. But Nicole makes a good point. It's going to be a commitment of 3 or 4 days real soon for telephone meetings and in-person meetings here. And then there's going to be some
In-person
interviews that
meetings.
need to be done, and there's going to be a lot of legwork to get back to get 1, 2, or maybe 3 people to come to a meeting in October for this board to interview and make a decision about. That's our game plan. We normally don't meet in October. So the other thing that we're asking for is that I would get to next, that we probably, is more of an announcement, is save the date of October 3rd. It's a Thursday, for the potential for an October board meeting to, if everything falls together, that's what we'd like to do. That would give us about 30 days overlap. Well, after you decide to hire them, then you gotta negotiate their contract and actually get them to start before she leaves on the 8th of November or some such matter. So the timeline is pretty close. But the motion's on the floor to appoint that. Now, the motion was 2, 2, and 1. If you wanna just change it to a 5-member board with the understanding that we're looking for 2, 2, and 1, but not tie our hands to it, so if we don't get people that sign up for it.
I'll change my second if you'll change the motion.
Yeah,
So it's just a 5-member board?
Yeah.
With the understanding we're looking for the 2, 2, and 1, but if we don't get it, we'll get it covered. Is that agreeable with
Got
people?
one.
You got the one.
Got the one.
We got the one, all right. Any other discussion or questions? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried.
Is there a process that, how we're gonna fill that, because we got Adrian who's interested in that, is it?
Well, is October 3rd an absolute?
Pretty much.
Okay, then I withdraw. I'm not here.
So do we have a process on how we can try to solicit those board members who are not here tonight? I mean, it doesn't give them much time, they have to respond pretty quickly.
Can they
Well,
send an
I would
email
suggest
to
that
the?
we just have the executive director send it out to all board members and say, hey, would you like to volunteer for this? Return it by date certain, 2 days down the road or 3
Right.
days down the road, and then we got the pool to change from. If we have to have a telephonic executive committee meeting to pick those, or know that we don't have.
with the
people.
October 3rd date in there, so, you know.
Yeah, because I mean, that's,
That might
if
be,
if that's
We
the only.
can change
if
that,
that's
we
the
can,
criteria.
Adrian, if that's the only thing I'd say, like, you know, we were just going back
So
and
we
forth with
arrived
dates,
at that
you know, once we
As
have the
we sat
committee.
there among ourselves, because the regular date, if we were to have an October meeting, is a Jewish holiday. So we looked on either side of that and thought a week earlier would be that much more
I
ideal.
didn't think you planned on it.
And
'cause
so
I-
we,
I
no,
wouldn't be
but I
able to-
mean, but I think just as we came upon that, if that were the only sticking point, we could try a doodle poll among those who are interested and available, knowing that we've got at least 2 executive committee members, 3 potentially. We prefer it
Well,
not
I
to be all
think we
4.
That, that was the whole board decision, and we were just trying to give the board a heads up to hang on to
We
a
need to
date.
come up with a date in October.
That weighs on getting candidates, getting them interviewed, and getting them there. But it could very well be a week later. It
Or
won't
a
be a
date
week earlier.
different in that week,
Right, so I think we can set, I mean, the goal is the first
We're keeping you on the.
2 weeks of October to
Yeah,
hold a
okay.
board
Yeah.
meeting. And forgive me, but the purpose of that board, because we don't normally meet in October, the
Yeah.
sole purpose of that meeting would be to interview finalists to the extent you have more than one, and for the board to make a decision between the final candidates. And so I think that's a major decision, and we should do a doodle poll and
Yeah.
just find out what's the date that's likely to get the most number of board members.
But this year we're not gonna have a November meeting, right?
We will have a November
we-
meeting.
In addition to the annual meeting?
So you,
Yes.
yes,
Okay. Because usually we don't have one in October, but we don't.
you'll have a
Yeah.
new executive director who you do not want to wait until
Till
December
November.
to give guidance to.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, we're
So
presuming that
we
we can
we
make
have
those
the-
candidates available on the date you say. So I do think there's
Yeah, right.
enough things at
Yeah, there's
play
enough.
that a
Carrie,
single
did we
date
vote that
should
motion
satisfy.
yet?
No.
All right, the motion's on the floor to form the committee.
That one,
And
Yeah, we did
that
vote
one
on
was
that.
voted.
We voted.
that we voted?
Yeah.
All right, the third was a suggested date. We don't need a motion for that, that's a heads up. All right? It might very well change, but probably not. We'll try to stick to it, but we just can't tell what's going on beyond that. All right? Anyone else from the executive committee want to say anything about the hiring process that I haven't covered?
Can I
Yeah,
just
go
clarify
ahead.
that if we're sending out an announcement to the full board to ask for their involvement, would we want to predetermine that date or say with the expected final interview to happen at a full board meeting during the first or second week of October, so that it doesn't happen, that we're cutting folks out before we know for sure.
So you're saying, should we doodle poll the date first and then?
Well, no,
No,
that
because we
we
need a
should
committee
seek
first, yeah.
interest and commitment opportunity from our full board in a way that says, would you be able to conduct final interviews during the first or second week of October? And that's,
Those are not the only interview, I mean.
no, of course, there's plenty of others, with the expectation we would be,
a
fair amount of availability and a availability certain the first, not later than the second week of October for final interviews, so that they know the target endpoint as well. I guess rather than putting the date into Clarence, I just
Susan,
am
you have-
worried about that.
Well, related to what Kim's saying is, I think that the communication out to the full board should probably include the timeline that the
The
executive
general
committee
timeline without a
discussed
particular
earlier
date,
today.
It's not a bad idea to put a general expectation of the time required too.
Absolutely.
Because
Five
people
or six,
think all they're doing is reading resumes.
No, no.
5 or 6 meetings, some
Yeah.
happening in the next
Okay.
month, and
As long as Adrian's still
with a
part of
big
the
deal.
mix, I'm happy.
Oh, yeah.
We're keeping her.
All right,
Don's got his hand up.
if there's nothing else on that, we'll go
Don's
back.
got his-
Yes, Don?
Clarence, is it appropriate for a board member here to request at this point in time an executive session?
Uh, That's a modification of the agenda to do it.
It would probably last about 5 minutes.
I'll tell you what you do, you like an executive session for 5 not to exceed 10 minutes, that's your request. I would ask the board, the pleasure of the board, yes or no on that issue before I rule on it as chair. All right?
I assume it's a personnel
For the
issue.
purpose.
We lost Jim on the phone.
Yeah, I've asked him to call my cell phone,
Okay.
because that's the best I can come up with.
He can call back on that
There
too.
he is.
It's, yeah,
Oh,
that's the problem. Hi,
Mm.
Jim. Sorry about that. So Don Collins has raised the prospects of entering an executive session, so that's the discussion underway.
So we're just going to take, I want a straw poll before I reel on this to see how the board, we're talking about no more than 10-minute executive session or less to discuss what?
Personnel.
A personnel issue, okay. That's one, that's, so all those in favor of being allowed to move into executive session, say aye, or raise your hand. Aye. 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. All those opposed? The poll is carried. All right, we'll move to executive session. Don's moving, we move into executive session for not to exceed. Not, all those in favor? Say aye. Those opposed? Motion's carried, so declare it.
It was seconded by Linda.
And seconded by
Turn the camera
Linda.
off.
I'm sorry, I didn't say, can you shut that thing off?
Yeah,
So we're on the budget?
Yeah,
We
we're
still have
budgeted.
Jim on the phone? Okay.
It went dead again.
Well, he's on my cell phone.
Okay.
Susan, could you go in the kitchen and get the recorder? I left it on the table, I just want to make sure I get it.
All right, so if that's all for that, then we'll move back to the budget,
Yeah.
which is number 4. Kim?
Yes, and so out of this, we're gonna need 2 motions, a motion for the amount of dues to be raised by the membership, and then a motion to approve the budget in its entirety. Do I need probably a motion right now to add a line item for executive search, ED search, under expenses? And that number would be 10,000.
So moved.
Thank you, and that will also
Seconded.
impact
Geo.
the transfer at the bottom.
So Lori made the motion and Gio seconded. And please leave your names when you make a motion.
Lori made the motion, Gio seconded it to those to raise the amount of dues by taxes, or, yeah.
No, this motion is to amend the budget for the, a line item under expense that is for the executive director search and $10,000. And that will force the change at the bottom and carry forward to go from 7920 to 17,920, or if that's not the right numbers,
Did you hear
then
that, Jim?
I need better glasses.
Okay,
Speak up if you can't hear me.
all right.
Okay, is that
That's a motion
Do we
for
have a
those,
second?
for that, the
first
transfer.
and second?
Is there any further discussion or questions? Not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried, so declared. All right.
Great, thank you.
The amount to be, the whole budget, the amount to be raised,
And then
by
the approval of the
dues.
budget, but if it's okay with you guys, I'll just quickly run through the notes, and you guys can ask
Okay.
me, is that okay? And
Yep.
then we'll approve the amount to be raised by dues, and then we'll approve the full budget. So the conference, and Carrie has done this nice little net income on the third page of the budget. She gives us netted line items. So the annual conference is projected again to raise a margin of 10,000. The amounts are as they are stated on the budget. The carry forward is a fill at the bottom of the budget that brings us to 0, and we just discussed how that's going to change. The board development is an income and expense item, so it's got a net to be raised is 15,000, and it's a fee for service on our work that Susan does.
And Sue.
And Sue, that's right, I'm sorry. Actually, that we all do. You all do, I should say, you all do. The contract database is expected to stay at the same level. The anticipated revenue to be raised by dues. So we included the, didn't we include the calculation sheet because it continues to be pretty convoluted, but basically we set the amount to be raised by dues. Half of that is raised by spreading it across all the districts / SUs, and the other half is on an ADM basis as pointed to the districts. So the amount to be raised by dues is $411,028. Okay, that is an increase of only 1% over a 5-year period. So, and the transition period was not increasing by more than a third of what, or decreasing for those 3 years. We are in our last year of this transition, the last time we're gonna have to have this conversation, and I am so excited. But for the last 2 years, we put the little calculation sheet in the back, so feel free to peruse it at your leisure, because I can finally actually speak to it without reading it to you. But we're done, which is great. And we've been very responsible in our time through this transition, and I think as much as it seemed like the craziest calculation that we could have ever dreamt up, I do think it sort of reflects the new state of being and makes sense in terms of what districts can afford to pay, what number of students for whom they're responsible, and the smallest districts can consume as much energy as the largest districts, so it makes sense that there's a piece of this that's shared equally and then a piece that is reflective of the students served and the ability to pay, I would say, and the way I would characterize it. That is total color commentary, but it seemed crazy 3 years ago, and it's been complicated, but I think it's the right thing. So hopefully, we haven't heard otherwise from people. And I'm just trying to think if there's other big things to point to. The search income, we're going to expect to do one of those in-house this year, and we get about 1,000 from each of the other 2 that we expect to do. The VSBA service agreement, we included more information on that for people to understand the scope of the work and to understand. We've actually had a meeting today with Laura Suarez in this time of transition for the organization, and she wanted to speak to us, and I think it's important for us as they being one of our big partners and our large funding source of the work that we're doing, to hear what they are understanding and expecting and appreciating of the work that Nicole does in service of this service agreement, and why it's a really important relationship for them as well, in terms of the support that VSBA provides to school districts, because VSBA is otherwise covering the liability from an insurance standpoint if school districts are not doing their jobs well. So it is a very symbiotic relationship that they expect to continue. We don't expect there to be any jeopardy to the income in that. I think she wanted us to hear, though, that which isn't put out in a task list that's really important to them about the work that Nicole does. And it was good to hear from her and know that she's also willing to, contribute in it whatever way is helpful in the process.
What Laura was also, Nicole does, or contracts to see to it that it got done.
That's right.
If
It
the
doesn't
executive director
mean
isn't doing everythred herself,
the clone has
she's
to do
making
it.
sure the right
So
people got hired to
just make sure
support
somebody
them.
does it, because
Yes.
this is in your agreement, folks. Let's not forget, and I think we all appreciated her interest in joining us in a conversation around it. It helped to amplify, I think, the value of that work and why it's important to both organizations. And it's not just the money, it's the partnership, I think.
So do we have a motion to approve the budget as proposed, as amended?
I just want to make sure we're there. The expenses, I want to point out on the health insurance, the benefits, we budgeted for that 15%, we know, or 15, whatever it was, for.
15.6.
At 15.6, and 12.4 is what Blue Cross Blue Shield has approved. VHI will not be setting their rates until another week, I think, or did she say September?
Yeah, we're not, we don't do VI, so.
Oh, I'm sorry, okay,
that's
exchange,
linked to our-
that's right,
yeah.
so you are bound by that.
Yeah.
However, what we discussed is that right now Nicole's on a single plan, we don't know who we'll be hiring, so to make that adjustment for that percentage difference, that could be a line item that goes over if we end up with a family coverage. So I inquired about that earlier today, we talked through it, even as I inquired, I kind of felt like leaving that fudge factor, I think, makes sense. And so we are not going to make that change. We are going to leave it based on the assumption we had at the time of the request of Blue Cross Blue Shield. And the salary increase for salary is 3% in the budget. And that is in line with what we've seen for contract settlements around, and I think makes sense in continuing to value the work of our folks in their staying strong for us in this transition time. All of you, we're grateful. And then I think everything else is self-explanatory. Is there anything anybody has questions about? And thank you to the Finance Committee, Lori and Jen.
Thank you.
So did you need a motion to raise the dues?
So, yep, I can tell you what that motion's gonna be unless she needs me to give you specific words, but I'll need those two motions. We'll vote on the dues first, because that will impact the budget, and then we'll vote on the amended budget that includes that additional 10,000.
Okay?
Can I have my question?
Yeah.
Yes.
So we have a motion. All right, going back to netted line items,
Yes.
what information do you have that makes us so optimistic that we're going to increase? Or, if I understand this right, we're going from 8,500 to 15,000?
No, we're going from 13, so we budgeted last year in that of 8,500, but we're expecting over 13,000,
Okay.
which is why we.
And then the other one then, the superintendent searches, we budgeted 3,000, we didn't get close to that, and we think we're gonna get 10,500. Do you have inside information that happens?
We're gonna do it ourselves.
In-house,
We're gonna do it
so we'll have a
ourselves.
higher
That means
profit margin.
All
All of it?
$8,500 comes into the association rather than 8,500 going in and 75 going out.
So do we have enough staff time to do that?
We do. Hi, Dawn.
You're gonna be a busy lady.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
We,
I gotta earn that.
I had seen her earlier, but I wondered who was gonna do that.
Yeah, Susan's already met with Bob Stevens and is also gonna meet with Mike DeWeese at some point when he's back from Canada. So she has access to people that have done it and be great to build that capacity in-house, because we've run into a couple situations
So we
over
are
the
gonna,
summer where we've had sort of emergency searches and no consultants available, and we don't have any.
so we are gonna
staff to
contract
swing.
with consultants, though. like
We will
Bob and-
continue, I
and
think we're
Mike.
budgeting two searches through consultants and one in-house.
Good.
Okay, any other questions? Not, motion to approve the budget as amended, proposed and amended?
I think we need to motion first to approve the amount to be raised by dues to be $411,028.
Who would like to make that motion?
So moved.
So moved by Linda to approve the budget, the amount to be raised by dues by 411, the number that Kim quoted.
$28.
And is
I'll
there a
second.
second to that?
I'll second.
Seconded by
Lori.
Lori. All right. Any further discussion or questions? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried, so declared. All right, now the next thing is to approve the total budget as amended that you have in front of you. It's, it doesn't change 414, right?
I think that's right.
Well, that's the balance sheet,
That's
Yes.
that's not the budget.
The budget
So the
It
budget
will
is-
change as we
will
amended
change
previously.
That from 7,000 to 17,920,
So,
Okay,
but that's already been approved.
so it will add a line item of 10,000 in expenses for executive director search. It will increase the total expenses to 800,420 and increase the carry forward required from unrestricted fund balance to $17,920.
okay, to approve those two numbers.
So moved.
So moved by Linda. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Jim. Any discussion or questions? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried, so declared. All right, that's the budget.
Thank you all.
Appoint Act 11 Bargaining Commission member. Bargaining Commission members are appointed by this board, right? And we had a resignation.
Right, so.
Yeah, give us a reference.
So the process that we had required us to look at geographical representation in addition to the statutory requirements and willingness to attend training, et cetera. Unfortunately, midway through the process, one of our commission members became ill, resigned from his school board first, and then decided he couldn't also, he hoped to be able to commit to seeing the process through, but his health was preventing him from doing that. So obviously having somebody resign after the bargaining is well underway is problematic. So I conferred with the executive committee and the bargaining team around a process that we could use that would both ensure we have a person that can step in that would provide the relative geographic representation, but at the same time not sort of bring somebody who's not really been exposed to the process at all into post-fact finding. Because that's where fact-finding hearing was held on Monday. So GEO has offered to serve essentially through November. He's the southernmost person that we've been able to identify that fits those criteria. I looked through all the folks that applied to join that commission, and GEO did not apply in the first round because we were trying to keep some distance from the VSBA board, but given his rapidly expiring term, I don't know, GEO, if you want to say anything about your interest.
Or commitment to bargaining. Thank you.
Oh, yeah. You got the 60-second speech?
No, I got nothing. I got nothing. I'd actually appreciate if you didn't vote for me.
Now, you realize there's that story around your house, you know what 60-second sex is? You got a minute? You walked into that one. Don't want to say anything other than you don't want us to vote for you, that's
Yeah,
fine.
please don't.
We need a motion to
We need
approve
somebody.
Gio
I'll make a
appointed
motion to
the
appoint
board.
Gio.
I second it.
Motion by Flor, seconded by Linda, to appoint Gio to the board. Is there any discussion or questions? Until the term is up in November, right?
We'll see.
It's a 2-year term.
It's a 2-year term. I'm committed to both.
Okay, you're committed to the
I'll
balance of the
serve out the
term.
term.
All right, very good. Any other questions or comments? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? There's one opposition. Gio voted no. All right. Motion carried, so declare it. Okay. The next item of business is at the August meeting, president of this organization is elected, and for that order of business, Madam Executive Director will take care of it.
You'll keep me in order, I presume, in terms of rules of order. So, the term of the president is for 1 year. The term starts, you've all just seen through your bylaws review, the term starts the day at the annual meeting, essentially. And so we'll open the floor for nominations for
I
president.
nominate Clarence Haynes.
Okay, and we do not need seconds, is that correct?
Correct.
Correct.
That was Linda?
It was Linda.
Thank you, Linda. Any other nominations?
With all due respect and appreciation for Clarence's service, I nominate Neil.
That was Kim Gleason.
Kim Gleason, thank you. Any other nominations? Okay. With hearing none, we will close nominations. Does anybody want to speak before we cast a vote? Either Neil or Clarence, or?
I would like to say that the majority of the executive committee at this point in time feels that Neil has the better capacity to take us into the next stage here in the search for the executive director. He has the right skill set that is needed.
Any other comments or discussion? All right, we have some paper ballots. I presume that that's the preferred method. If you can. Don't be a vote.
Abstain if you don't know enough about it.
You can always abstain.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Feel the call.
Oh, wow, look at all these.
Look at all those votes you're getting.
You're talking about abstaining, but you voted for me?
Thank you.
That's true.
Yeah, thanks. You're doing good.
That's a lot for you there.
I'm not, that's.
Are there any extra ballots?
Neil's got them all.
Neil's got
Uh-huh.
We'll just check.
Can I have a blank ballot?
You'd have several.
Okay.
Okay, and when you're done, you can just put your hand in the air and come by. Grab it. I'll.
I got it.
All over the table.
Who are we going?
I don't know.
Yeah, we'll just count on
Thank you. I got it so long ago, I get compliments on it all the time. It was from a store called Sports Style, which is on Route 7, getting into the South Burlington. It's closing. It's been around a long time. But anyway,
Vice President.
it's very, just kind of fun. Thank you.
While they're out counting the ballots and that, just for the sake of the new members, if somebody decides who doesn't cut it,
Oh,
make
yeah.
this out, put your name on the top, sign it,
And the first time, put your address on it. After that, you just have to sign it.
No, he.
I bumped the ride.
and basically, this is gonna get you your mileage payment, you'll get a check in the mail, so it's important that they have the
full
right.
disclosure when
the
I
right
decided to
information.
drive. I was like, I'm taking the money, you can wait.
The auditor just looks for the signature.
I have the results of your vote. Neil had the majority of votes for VSBA president for the term commencing November 8th, 2019.
Thank you for your service, Clarence.
Yes.
So Clarence will be with us as his past president, right?
He'll be with us as president,
Right. but-
and
Until
as
November.
president for a year.
Mm-hmm.
We have the consent agenda.
I move with the consent agenda.
So what about the other officers? At what point do they?
They get elected at the first meeting in November,
Okay, after the.
after the new
regional-
regional members are selected. Motion to make to approve the consent agenda by Gio. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Linda. Any questions or comments on the minutes, consent agenda? Not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, motion's carried, so declare it. Do we have any new business to come before said meeting?
I do think next month for regional meetings are going to get underway, and we will be needing your support in spreading the word. Just as a very quick preview, we're going to have content on the bylaws changes and the resolutions, as we always do, but also of hopefully interest to the members, digging into the data in the annual snapshot, and we'll be given some tools to do that with board members from the Agency of Education. So the data and how do you unpack performance data for your school district? And then also an update from individual members of the bargaining commission. They cannot wait to hit the road with us to update you all in terms of the current status. I think that's really important as it heads down the path. So that's where we're headed with the regional meetings. We'll have more information going out through our newsletter in a couple weeks.
And those are next month.
Those start the third week of September. So
September 10th.
do they start?
Rutland's the first one on the
it's September
agenda.
10th? Okay, I missed that.
And they go through late October.
Through late that, because we had 11 meetings to squeeze in.
Yeah, 11 meetings and a lot of holidays.
So we can call the office and no one answers?
We're on the way, we're on the road. VSBA hits the road.
Anyone have any other new business?
I have a question.
Yes.
Do any boards have any sort of limitation on how long they let somebody step aside? Anybody's board? We have somebody who wanted to be gone, was gonna be out of the area for at least a month, probably 2, maybe 3. You guys just give them a pass, or?
We've had let people who had work schedules change for 3 months, stay on the board. Then they came back.
You can't take them.
Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, just
Like for
as
local
a-
board?
Yeah.
Do they have an opportunity to participate remotely? Or any
I think
live
so.
streaming or?
No, I don't think so. I think they're just stepping aside. We have a lot of committee meetings on our board. So they're just
But they
stepping
can't be
aside from all
removed,
that.
so
Well,
if
the
they're not
board-
willing to
I
I just
remove
said I'd bring it up
themselves.
at the meeting.
Yeah, you can't, I mean, the board, you can't, they're
You can't
accountable
remove
to their
them.
constituents.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
so,
They're
But we
elected by
can
Vermont
suggest.
statute, you know, they.
No, no, I
if
wasn't
they're-
saying you
they're
can't
elect-
kick them off, but I mean, you can
Oh.
suggest.
You'd be
Yeah,
able to offer.
but I don't think legally you have any grounds unless they violate a
Oh, yeah, no, nobody wants to like do
condition of their
anything horrible
office,
to
you
them.
know, I bottom line is.
Anything horrible to them.
We have one, we're late tonight, it's 8:04. Does someone want to make the motion?
I move to adjourn.
Linda moves to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second. Christina seconds.
Christina seconds.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Did you catch up? It's pretty late.